Saturday, July 29th, 2017, Monaco 64, home of alternative economics and contrarian views. So I'd like to talk about gold, the enemy of the state. Yes, enemy of the state and big government. To start out, though, I'd like to read a little bit from Alan Greenspan's Gold and Economic Freedom essay. This essay was published in Ayn Rand's Objectivist newsletter in 1966 and reprinted in her book, Capitalism, the Unknown Ideal, in 1967. I know a lot of you, and including myself, don't have much respect, maybe. That might be the wrong word for Alan Greenspan. You know, he was a central banker. But intellectually, I think Alan Greenspan still believes in what he wrote about 50 years ago. And even Ron Paul told me once when I was at the Mises Institute in 2002 that he had this essay autographed or signed by Alan Greenspan. And he asked Alan Greenspan if he still believed in what he wrote, even though, you know, because he was head of a central bank. And he said, I still do. No change. And he said, you know, the public want it. You know, there's no political will for a gold standard. That's what Alan Greenspan said to Ron Paul. Sorry. So yeah, I am thankful for that essay, despite what Alan Greenspan did in his career. So I want to read from this essay because Alan Greenspan explains very well why gold is the enemy of the state. So I start from the beginning, and I quote, and it says, an almost hysterical antagonism toward the gold standard is one issue which unites statists of all persuasions. They seem to sense, perhaps more clearly and subtly than many consistent defenders of laissez-faire, that gold and economic freedom are inseparable, that the gold standard is an instrument of laissez-faire, and that each implies and requires the other. He goes on to say, in order to understand the source of their antagonism, it is necessary first to understand the specific role of gold in a free society. And yeah, I like to talk about this because some people think that gold bugs only want gold to go up so they can get rich quick. No, I think it's more of an intellectual thing. You know, of course, it helps that it protects you against inflation and keep you, you know, protects your savings. But it's also intellectual and moral stance. So, and he goes on to say, money is the common denominator of all economic transactions. It is that commodity which serves as a medium of exchange, is universally acceptable to all participants in an exchange economy as payment for their goods or services, and can therefore be used as a standard of market value and as a standard of value, i.e., a means of saving. And he goes on to say the existence of such a commodity is a precondition of a division of labor economy. If men or women nowadays did not have some commodity of objective value, which was generally acceptable as money, they would have to resort to primitive barter or be forced to live on self-sufficient farms and forego the inestimable advantages of specialization. If men and women had no means to store value, i.e. to save, neither long-range planning nor exchange would be possible. And he goes on to say, what medium of exchange will be acceptable to all participants in an economy is not determined arbitrarily, i.e. by government or fiat. First, the medium of exchange should be durable. In a primitive society of meager wealth, wheat might be sufficiently durable to serve as a medium, since all exchanges would occur only during and immediately after harvest, leaving no value surplus to store. But where store of value considerations are important, as they are in richer, more civilized societies, the medium of exchange must be a durable commodity, usually a metal. And he goes on to talk about all other kinds of things or commodities that have been money. I guess if he was writing this essay nowadays, he could include digital currencies like Bitcoin or Ethereum. I still think longer term, well, the track record still shows gold and silver as the ideal money for the market. I think digital currencies have a place in a free market, but I think gold and silver are still the dominant forms of money. And he ends the essay, because I'm not going to read the whole thing, and he talks about the gold standard, and he says, under a gold standard, the amount of credit that an economy can support is determined by the economy's tangible assets, since every credit instrument is ultimately a claim on some tangible asset. But government bonds are not backed by tangible wealth, and government bonds is what backs fiat money, by the way. And he goes on to say, only by the government's promise to pay out of future tax revenues and cannot easily be absorbed by the financial markets. So, a large volume of new government bonds can be sold to the public only at progressively higher interest rates. Thus, government deficit spending under a gold standard is severely limited. The abandonment of the gold standard made it possible for the welfare statists, and also the corporate statists, I would add, Mr. Greenspan, to use the banking system as a means to an unlimited expansion of credit. They have created paper reserves in the form of government bonds, which, through a complex series of steps, the banks accept in place of tangible assets and treat as if they are an actual deposit, as the equivalent of what was formerly a deposit of gold. And he goes on to say, in the absence of the gold standard, there's no way to protect savings from confiscation through inflation. And inflation is just the issuance of more and more debt or government bonds to create fiat money. I know nowadays they say that inflation is a measure of, CPI or PPI, but that's not true. They're trying to trick you into thinking that there isn't inflation. There isn't inflation. There is no safe store of value. If there were, the government would have to make its holding illegal, as was done in the case of gold. This is in 1966. So gold was illegal then as a form of savings in the US from 1933 to 75. If everyone decided, for example, to convert all his bank deposits to silver or copper or any other good, and therefore declined to accept checks as payments for goods, bank deposits will lose their purchasing power, and government-created bank credit would be worthless as a claim on goods. The financial policy of the welfare state requires that there be no way for the owners of wealth to protect themselves. And he finishes by saying, this is the shabby secret of the welfare statists' tirades against gold. Deficit spending is simply a scheme for the confiscation of wealth. Gold stands in the way of this insidious process. It stands as a protector of property rights. If one grasps this, one has no difficulty in understanding the statists' antagonism towards the gold standard. So nowadays, it's not only statists, but also bankers, because they benefit from this largesse of the more and more debt. They make money, fiat money off it, with which they can buy real goods. So it's not just the statists' tirades against gold. And that's why people disparage in the mainstream media and in the mainstream financial sector, the bankers, they disparage gold bugs. they say they're like, I don't know, they just say they're crazy or, you know, conspiracy theorists. So now I like to talk about how, you know, this kind of situation, you know, the gold standard being dropped in 1971 has led to, you know, this debt bubble, which in my opinion is the big elephant in the room. That's the big bubble. It's government debt, you know, or debt in general, and big government. And by big government, I mean corporate and social welfare. It's not a question of left and right. Left and right are the problem, you know, and I'll show you some charts because, you know, as you can see here, I'm going to show you some charts of U.S. debt going back all the way to the beginning. So I'll bring up this chart. As you can see, federal debt held by the public. You can see there were spikes in 1790 there. That was after the Revolutionary War against the British. Debt to GDP was like 30%. During the Civil War, there was a spike. During World War I, World War II. But up until World War I, you can see that after all these crises, which they were, the wars, the debt came back down to almost like 0% of GDP. World War I, though, it did come down, but just to 10%, and then it kept going up with the Great Depression and World War II, and then, you know, we came back down in the 70s to around 20%, but then we went off the gold standard, and even though we haven't had a war, you know, the federal debt held by the public is, you know, gone parabolic. So, and it just goes to, and I want to show another chart, and just to prove to you that this is not, I'm not left or right. I'm not having a go at the Democrats or the Republicans. I'm having a go at both of them because they're both part of the problem. I guess the conservatives or Republicans, they favor more corporate welfare, and the left or Democrats favor more social welfare, even though both of them favor both. And here's another interesting chart, or a little, you know, picture here. It says Trump inherits a national debt that could destroy the country. As you can see, you know, it's been rising under George Herbert Walker Bush, Bill Clinton, George W. Bush, and Obama. So it's more than just a partisan thing. It's just a statist thing. It's big government. And then I want to show you also this chart of the credit market. And this is really interesting because you can see how the credit market only started really growing after 1970. And it's really picked up since 1970. And why? Well, because the shackles of discipline from a gold standard have been lifted, and not only governments, but consumers have been encouraged to borrow, and so have corporations, because this system needs never-ending, you know, debt to pay existing debt. So that, you know, and you can see the little, you know, in 2008 crisis there was like a dip there, and it would, that chart would probably have collapsed even more, and that's what QE and you know, the monetary policy of zero interest rates that we've had since then, you know, that rise there after that dip, that's you know, supported the continuation of the system. And you might say it's always been like that, and I actually will tell you that it hasn't. And I want to go back and look at government spending historically. And I'll bring first a chart comparing different countries. We've got Germany, Japan, United Kingdom, and United States. And it's going back to 1880. and its government spending as a percentage of GDP. And as you can see there, up until before World War I, government spending was below, as a percentage of GDP, was below 10% for the major countries, US, Japan, and the United Kingdom. Germany was a bit higher, but still below 20%. And of course, during World War I and World War II, that rose. But notice how after World War II, it never came back down to below 10%. It's kept rising, and we're now basically between 40 and 50%. And it just goes to show not only the abandonment of the gold standard has led to more government, big government, and loss of freedom, because the more government there is, the less freedom there is. And yeah, that's what's happened. Abandonment of the gold standard, and also using crises like wars to perpetuate, this big government agenda. So will gold rise like a phoenix from the ashes and put an end to this crazy, bubble of government debt? This crazy idea that we need big government and a lot of debt to have a free and prosperous society? I would counter. I would say we need the exact opposite. We need small government. We need sound weights and measures, and that means sound money and a gold standard, and competition. If I'm not saying cryptocurrencies are not going to do well, they should be people should be free to use whatever they want. But I think for international trade amongst sovereign nations, gold and silver are the ultimate, form of money, and have been for thousands of years. So whether this will take place, we don't know. But the system is broken. That is the elephant in the room. And gold is the only thing that can save and rebalance the whole book of nations. So if you enjoyed this video, please like, share, and subscribe if you haven't yet. And follow me on steemit.com as well, STEEMIT.com. If you'd like to donate, there's some links below in the description. And I'll talk to you later. Bye.